You're listening to Freight Famous, presented by Rose Rocket, bringing you the people that make trucking move. From behind the scenes into the limelight. Here's your host, Justin Bailie.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another show of Freight Famous, brought to you from our beautiful studios here in downtown Toronto. It's actually the Rose Rocket office. Today with us is Mike Melwicks from Moto Transportation. This is a special show to me. We'll get into why that is, but I've known Mike for a long time, and I'm really interested to hear what he has to say about some of the things we're going to get into today around working with startups, buying technology, changing from one system of record, a TMS in this case, to another. I think a lot of great insights for a sort of mid-sized company coming at you today. We are moving this podcast from once a month to twice a month. We're having great success and having a lot of fun doing this. So we're going to try and bring you more content. And with that, I'll bring you Mike Melwick. Hey, Mike, thanks for joining us, man. Happy to have you here today.
I'm happy to be here, Justin. Thank you very much.
Okay, cool. I let off in the intro talking about why this was a special show, or I mentioned it was a special show, and so I think obviously you need to give some context to that. For our listener group, you may not have heard of Moto Transportation, you may not have heard of Mike either, but I think why Mike is really important to us here at Rose Rocket, and why I really want to have him on, was Mike was our first customer, but also our first lead. So if we go back to 2016, I'm sitting in at a boardroom table in a converted living room at a house in Silicon Valley that we were paying exorbitant amounts of money for to rent, which we couldn't afford at the time. And here it was, the three founders trying to figure out what we were going to do with our life and how we were going to build a transportation management software. And in comes Mike's email asking to learn more about what Rose Rocket was. And so I enthusiastically jumped on the phone and had a conversation with Mike for about an hour. And felt pretty encouraged that we may be onto something because one person had actually stood up and said this is potentially interesting. I think, Mike, would be really helpful today in sort of the entirety of this conversation is to understand how you think about working with startups, how other people should think about working with startups, how you decide to buy a piece of software and endure the pain that's going to come from working with companies like Rose Rocket or whatever that might be, how you make switches off software, all the things around that, because I think we have a lot of people that are interested in Rose Rocket or other TMS systems. It could be any, it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be Rose Rocket. And they don't actually know how to do it, especially if a company of your size. You don't have a 20-person IT team there. It's kind of you as an entrepreneur, just really diving into working with that. So just really for everybody, listening, would love to get your insight on how you think about software, how you think about working with startups, and sort of anything in that vein would be I think super super delicious.
Oh, delicious for me as well.
Sure.
I think we'll start off. There's a lot to unpack there. Just finding Rose Rocket originally, and I was keeping a pulse on Y Combinator and the transportation tech with a news search, and I saw a release come out from you guys, and I was interested in what that really entails. For my thinking is you always, well, for me, I would like to be on the leading edge of tech in my business, transportation wise. And as you know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. There's a lot of companies out there still using spreadsheets and pieces of paper and a wooden board, for example, to keep track of things. And it's crazy to me that companies don't stay on the bleeding edge or leading edge of technology to know what's out there for productivity reasons, whatever. So anyway, getting back to that, you reached out, we started talking, and, I like what you guys were saying in terms of where you were headed and what you were thinking about. There had to be an easier way, and a more, I think what I really drew me to Rose Rocket and your tech was the simplicity of the look of it. And I don't know, you've probably seen other TMSs, like they are, they're tedious to get to know. And when you're converting a team over, they're not the easiest thing to deal with in some cases. So that's what really drew me to, and just like finding something new, exciting. whatever the situation may be, right? And just seeing what's out there, what could be better, how could we do things better, how could we do things cheaper, how could we be more productive? That's always on top of mind for me.
Yeah, you raised a few interesting points I want to double click on there. One of them was the idea of getting people over. So for some backstory, we sit here today for full disclosure, and Moto Transport and Rose Rocket are partners. They're a customer of ours, and been really, really helpful for us because of Mike's early adopter mindset in really helping drive some of the product innovation. We've had my co-founder and our CEO, Justin Skye, has spent the better part of a week out at Mike's operations learning the business back in the early days when again, we just didn't have much of a product. We were certainly
wireframing and figuring it out.
we were long on ambition and short on product, and but we endeavored to learn, and as the business grew, we'd sent out on another occasion. I think to help convert you guys over into the product, we sent out our at the time. I don't even know what Rob's title would have been back then. He was kind of our in-house trucking expert. He got everybody live. Rob was our Swiss Army knife. He's still here today. I don't mean to speak of him as if he's not working at Rose Rocket any longer. And I will say, actually, as a funny side note, Rob still speaks to this day. Rob and I did a lot of traveling together, and I often say, the best. We reminisce on days gone by because from here in Canada we haven't traveled in quite literally 2 years, and so we talk about the old trips. And Rob tells me stories of the best trip he ever had was going to see Mike in Kelowna. So Rob lands in for those who don't know, Kelowna is a beautiful town in sort of the interior of British Columbia, and it's full of vineyards and mountains. It's heaven on earth, quite frankly, and that's where Mike is lucky enough to live and have a family. And so Mike picks Rob up from the airport when he lands, and Rob's there to do some pretty intensive training and onboarding and all the things. And so he's got his game face on, and from what I understand, Rob and Mike head straight to the vineyard, and they go into have a dinner and drink wine. And Rob calls me that night after he's had some wine. He's like, "I'm not coming back." And so it was. I think we've had again a good relationship as two businesses, but I digress from that story. I guess what I'd like to understand is
that's really a good story to come back to, Justin. We also had boating involved in there. We did a kickoff on Canada Day in a private meeting setting with all of our management team. We brought them all in, and Rob was a fabulous player in getting us going with Rose Rocket. I love the guy. And I wish I could talk to him on a regular basis because we have really good conversations. We enjoy the same things, and especially getting things up and running with a startup. And when we were early, things were a bit different, right? There's not the knowledge base and things like that. So we kind of had to do it manually. And, quite frankly, he was an integral part of getting us going. Yeah,
he was. Those early days, I think it's really important as a business to have people like that who understand, who have some pretty deep customer empathy. He'd obviously worked in the space for a long time, and as a general manager, he'd sort of had his finger on a lot of the businesses, and also understood Rose Rocket and was, and you and I can both attest to, anyone that knows Rob would say he's a incredibly passionate, enthusiastic individual.
Totally.
So you kind of combine all of those, and those are critical individuals in your business.
That goes back to what you were saying earlier about working with a new startup, a new technology. In the trucking business and transportation logistics, everybody does things differently, and just figuring that out is, I can't even think what you guys go through, trying to massage this into everybody's way of doing things. So it was imperative, and thank you for sending him out. That was awesome.
Well, yeah, sure, our pleasure, and thank you for being loyal and being with us. So going back to Rob's visit out there for what that was about, and we've put a lot of energy in our business around, getting customers live, and obviously from that point to this point, our business has changed immensely, and we have a lot more people, a lot more processes, and, we actually have metrics on these types of things. And back then it was a lot more, hand-to-hand combat, a bit more brute force in terms of how we did it. But I have to think from your side, and a lot of the, the customers that we work with, especially for, how many staff members were you converting at that time? Just remind me, what was how many people did you have to get over from one software to the next?
We were 30 at that time.
Yeah, so it's not an insignificant sort of change management exercise.
Yeah.
Giving advice to people who are looking at an organization of similar sizes. We have a lot of companies in and around that size, and a lot of people on the sidelines maybe looking to start working with Rose Rocket that are sort of in and around that size. What kind of advice can you give those companies who are about to or are currently going through a change management with like that, specifically in trucking, because as you alluded to, these aren't millennial marketers, right? This is a different user base and a different sort of demographic. So any insights there?
How much time do we have? No, I'm just joking. But really, if I were just to cherry pick the main points is, when doing that, we need to have someone in the organization that knows the organization top to bottom and pull them aside from implementation. And I'm sure you see it all the time. We were guilty of it in the past, is we implement this thing while working in the business. This is a complete separate project that needs to have attention by one person to, basically facilitate each of the departments and make sure they're operating correctly. And I would go as far as saying, looking back, I would be running the system in parallel prior to doing any type of switchover, and just to make sure that not every system's the same, and you've got to work through these things and find different avenues. But a lot of people talk to me about software and they're just implementing, when they have time. It just doesn't work. You have to pull someone off and put them on this project that knows the business top to bottom. That's the number one thing you have to remember.
It's interesting you say that in parallel, because the only comment I'd have to that is, I feel like, is there not risk that parallel is a bit of a chicken exit, in that you can say it's not perfect over here in the new environment, which it never is going to be, right? But does parallel not offer the opportunity to offboard very quickly back to the way things were, kind of that safety net?
Oh, that's the biggest challenge you're going to have to, go. People want to go back. It's, who moved my cheese thing.
Yeah.
You're constantly fighting your legacy staff, if you will, on doing things differently and for the greater good of the future. That is the number one challenge. I should have said that earlier. Number one challenge you have to deal with. But running in legacy is what I didn't really mean running two systems in with the same data. I mean running through the motions in parallel, making sure that it's running properly, so that when you go to the Who Moved My Cheese staff members, you can show them, well, we've thought of this. This is how it's going to work in the future, and we're going live Monday.
Yep, right. And so there is that there's no fail-safe at that point. It's going to work. There's going to be problems, and you're just going to endeavor to work through those for when you come out on the other side.
Yeah, and of course, just one sec. I should say that this one person is going to bring in, other members of the team and departments and things that make sure it's operating. And you should never have to go down that route. But there's definitely, in every company, you're going to have to prove yourself.
A bit of a loaded question here. How long does it take for the Who Moved My Cheese folks, as you call them, to be non-vocal about going back or being okay with the way things are? What is that sort of period of disruption? How long would you think that to be, or what's normal?
What's normal is definitely you're going to in for a month of hell.
Yeah.
With these people, and then it'll wane over time. I say that probably there is still people today that are like, I wish it would do this or wish it would do that, but that's with anything, and that's probably in their nature. So I would go back to it. This 30 days of transition. You have to work really hard in the first 30 days to win them over and show them the value of the software or whatever you're implementing.
And I guess, and then sort of stepping to that, so if we're looking at companies that have said, yeah, we're in the middle of this, or we're going to go ahead with that, we've offered advice for them. People who are maybe a little earlier in the journey, how does a company work with new tech companies? And I want to make this more sort of agnostic of just Rose Rocket. It's just sort of any of these. There's a lot of new solutions that are super interesting that are coming out that are probably relatively immature young companies. But probably offer a lot of promise and a lot of upside if you know how to work with them. So I'm just interested in how you have thought about that. And again, you're someone who I really think of as pretty cutting edge when it comes to a lot of things. And I'd like to get into it a little bit. Even the business that is Moto. When we first came across that business, it's the first time we'd ever seen a model like this. And you see them now. It's much more common now. We see them come in the door sort of, I wouldn't say all the time, but much more commonly. So I think of you as someone who's pretty far out in front generally. So I think you're a good person to give advice to, maybe not relatable completely from that end of things, but certainly I think you can speak, to it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm guilty of putting pressure on our business with technology, stacking the stack too high. and seeing what kind of falls out. And, not always doing my best job in due diligence. I like to, throw things into the fire and see what burns, right? So, in terms of what we do in our decision-making process is myself or our VP will go out and do the demos first and get a high-level overview to see what really fits and what's really exciting. Then we sit down internally and we say, like, what is the need of this? What is the what's going to improve in the business? How is it going to affect our company, and how is it going to affect our bottom line? Can we, increase productivity, reduce staff, depending on all these situations and on the particular software. And then it's multiple departments getting involved in terms of really in-depth demos to ensure we are asking all the right questions. Because not with Rose Rocket in particular, but any tech company, there's always these stones no one ever thinks to turn over and have a look. And as you know, the things could change with the software. It's constantly developing and changing. Or what's your roadmap? Where are you headed with this? What's the long-term effects on our company? So there's a lot of research and development and demos that go into our decisions with these things. It's not lightly taken. And like I said before, I would switch before Rose Rocket. We switched a couple TMSs, and it was my fault 100% that we'd say this looks like it works on the surface, but we really never got into the deep inner workings and how it affects invoicing or collections or tracking and tracing or all these other departments or customs, how it affects all these things that we just didn't take the time to do. So being thorough, I think that's the number one thing, is just make sure you don't rush into it, and just be thorough on your needs and make sure that if something doesn't work, that you're okay with it.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, we've talked about that a lot, and again, it's something from when you're a young startup and you're trying to build product, you don't realize it maybe as much, but most of the interaction you're having are actually in a demo environment because you haven't secured a lot of customers. Even if you're onboarding, it's probably fits and starts. You haven't fully realized a full end-to-end. Our company's running their business on your software, especially if you're a system of record like us. And I think that, so you sort of build the product and you end up optimizing almost for the demo. So you get these like environments that like, wow, this thing looks incredible because the system is, the scenario is static. We're going to demonstrate this scenario based on this. And I think you raised a good point there. It can't just be the demo. It has to be a sort of a deeper double click. And maybe that's what you're guilty of, is sort of being sort of sold on a demo basis on kind of the perfect scenario where it was really, and again, I don't think it's intentionally devious. It's just the best when you're an early company and you're talking to, it's hard to get people's time to have meaningful, iterative product feedback loop conversations in the absence of any real customers. Demos are your greatest sort of place to have a meaningful conversation with the business owner and the target that you're going after. So you end up optimizing, again, I think somewhat subconsciously, almost for the demo unto itself. I think Rose Rocket actually early days was very guilty of that, is we had an amazing demoable product that worked like shit in practice. And so as we started to have the practice, because it kind of goes both ways. You guys take the product, you put it in place, and it's like, oh, this doesn't actually work for invoicing. And then you tell us that, we're like, oh crap, this thing doesn't work for invoicing. Not to say that was with us, but I honestly, quite frankly, imagine it was. So it's, that's, I guess I'm trying, my question that's sort of buried in here is, how do you de-risk? Because I think that's what a lot of, and I think for you as being really that early adopter or even maybe an innovator on kind of the bell curve of adoption, you probably have a risk profile that doesn't align with everybody else in this space. So they're kind of deeper into the this is a risk to me. How should somebody who's maybe a couple degrees more conservative than you think about de-risking?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I can only use what we do, and we have staff that are willing to look at the software, any inefficiencies, and work around it. I think there's always a level of risk, no matter what software you choose. Nothing's going to be perfect, and I can't even imagine from your perspective, Justin, dealing with all these transport companies that do things in a million different ways. We're all in the same business, moving freight point to point, but how they do it, I don't even know. I can't even tell. Everybody does it differently. So de-risking it is doing due diligence and making sure you're comfortable with this thing. We've got situations, right now where we other carriers we work with, they're in a software situation and they just can't get through it because they don't have the resources to put into it and think outside the box or find a workaround, which there always is. It may not be the best workaround, but there's always a way to deal with something. So de-risking it is looking at the workarounds and seeing if you're okay with what's there, what's presenting itself. Does that make sense?
It does. And do you think about that in that, and I think you make a very interesting point because you bring up that there's to be an expected, it's not going to be perfect. So there needs to be an expected level of discomfort, an expected level of workaround. And so when you think about workarounds, do you look at them as these are ones that we can live with indefinitely, and these are ones that we'll need sort of solved in a sort of a short to medium term? Like, you kind of value the level of work, the amount or the type of workaround differently, and then you can kind of, because I think that kind of goes back to that. You look at the roadmap of a company, but reality is in an early stage company, they can present a roadmap for 3 years. They may not even make it. And so there's sort of that even will they survive? So let's just say it's that all is kosher and they make it and you believe that and that you're comfortable with that risk. It's more around like, do you look at the types of workarounds as, sort of, I don't know, levels of severity almost, or how do you kind of decide what you're willing to live with?
Yeah, there's, and we've done it with, just to be transparent, we've done it with Rose Rocket. We look at, bugs we put in or something we'd like changed, and we look at them at the end of the day, at the end of the year. We're like, what's really important to us these days? It's like maybe this one thing, and the rest, it's, we'd love nice to haves, you know what I mean? But we realize at the same front that, these software companies are playing to the masses, and there's some things that work. Like, I always say this to everybody, is like, you in a software business, you change one thing, it affects 100 other things. And, that is not an easy process to deal with. So let's just pick the low-hanging fruit here and go after the main ones and see if we can deal with those.
Right. So it's really separating ones that prevent you from doing your business versus ones that are, as you said, would be nice to haves, but don't, plainly said, don't cost you any money at the end of the year.
Exactly. Yeah. There's some big ones that really it cost us money, or we could save a ton of money with, or could just add a bunch of productivity or visibility, for us. But we live with it. Yeah.
I'm curious about to get into Moto Transportation just a little bit, and I think it helps kind of weave how you ended up working with us. So what's the history of Moto? How did it become? And maybe tell myself and our listeners about what Moto is and what you guys are all about.
Yeah, and it's I think we're a tech forward company. It stems from inception. We formed the company in 2012, and I saw a advancing technological aspect of the business that not a lot of carriers were taking advantage of. So that's what we did, is we went totally cloud-based, VoIP phones. We had no servers, no IT staff. And, quite honestly, circling back to something you said earlier, we don't have an IT department. We choose you for our IT department. It's just, I don't know what to do with servers. Like, I'll leave that in your hands. So we saw this thing, coming down the pipe, and, things were changing, and, we're a complete Google house. And we saw opportunity to do more with less. That's simply how it is, and just be better at what we did. So we've currently morphed into, originally started heavily in the recycling and oil and gas business. And we've transformed into a less than truckload cross-border domestic carrier, asset-based trucking company, 3PL, freight forwarder, and customs clearance provider. So we've got all these different animals and moving around the company and trying to manage them. So we've definitely started off as a 3PL and moved into this bit of a monster, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting. I mean, I think I would, and I wasn't aware of the freight forwarding and custom clearance aspect of the business, but I think in the sort of the light asset model that you guys present, it's super interesting. So it's like a consolidator almost, really, the way you guys run the business, right? And it's I think a very impressive model that I think really brings to. I think you really are able to extract the value from the two components of both of those businesses and marry them together nicely. I think what we often see, and you would see in industry wide, and a lot of people will recognize this, is sort of that the 3PL and the assets are generally sort of brought online separately or really kind of as A and B. What I think what you guys have done a tremendous job of doing, and I think is actually a great model for a lot of other companies trying to figure this out, is it almost appears like, and I have never gotten the backstory about kind of where you started and how you added to it, but it appears like it was always thought of as interconnected from day one. One relies on the other. The brokerage is helping sort of feed the assets, and the assets are helping support the brokerage, but in a really harmonious, non-combative way, as you often see with asset and brokerage under the same roof. It's a very difficult thing to pull off. So I commend you on, really making it work. Yeah, really. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So thank you very much. Yeah. No, it's just definitely, we run our assets on our most profitable, busiest lanes. Those trucks are kept busy. That's how we do it. And then they get to pick and choose from our 3PL freight forwarding side what they want to do. It's actually a pretty neat system.
And I'm asking a lot just because of the timing of when we're talking, and I think you started in this space. Well, you started with this business in 2012, and I think our time in this industry is roughly the same. You and I, and so I can think of a few cycles we've been through in the space in terms of just supply and demand, and driver shortages has been a story from the day I started, and but this is a special time to choose a word. How
I use wild.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know what? That's probably better, and it's probably more accurate. How are you guys thinking about this? Not in terms of, we know what we've been through, and everybody who's in this space, from a 3PL side to an asset-based carrier, we all know where we've been. We don't have to go and wax back on the last 2 years, or in some ways the last year even. But how are you thinking about tomorrow and the day after? What are you seeing that's come down? Are you seeing any changes that you think are here to stay? Are you seeing rumbles in the market? How are you guys thinking about the next 12 to 24 months?
Oh, well, you know what, for us, we are looking at a couple things. We're looking at putting more assets on to control our costs, because we have a certain amount of trucks running certain lanes. Anything over and above that, we go to the outside market, which is in most cases the cost of that transportation has doubled or tripled, like overnight since the middle of January. And that's concerning to me. I haven't seen that for a long time. I like to say that I've been in business probably now for over 30 years. And the pricing I've seen, the last time I saw this happen was 2007, 2008, when it was just crazy. For us long term, we look at the thing and we're like, let's not get too deep into this. Let's keep doing what we're doing. Let's stay lean, and make sure that if there was a downturn or something happens or something falls out of the market, that we're prepared to sustain any downturn that happens. This could go on for a long term. We're looking at port backups and things like that, and we get a lot of our freight offshore. And we're seeing some things happen there that it's still very vibrant. Bulk container pricing is down. We're watching that right now. Bulk shipping is down price wise. So we're keeping an eye on that, and we're just keeping an eye on volumes. And I would say that, January and February, early February are just wild. Like, I can't even tell you, Justin, what has gone on, what has happened. Things have been absolutely insane. And I've never seen it before. Never seen it before in my life. Trucking rates peaked in 1986 when deregulation happened, and they just haven't come back now. They've eclipsed anything in terms of pricing. New trucks are expensive. Their pricing is going through the roof, and at the end of the day, who's paying for it? And that's the consumer. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen. The cure for high prices is high prices. How long will that last? I don't know.
Yeah, and how are your customers with this? What are the conversations like that you're having with them?
We're just telling them basically, transit times have been affected. We're like, let's say, we'll pick it up, put it under one of our warehouses, but it's going to be moved as soon as possible with one of our, when the volume can be met, and they're paying more. Like, I'm cringing at some of the invoices going out. I'm just like, I've never seen this before. Like, it's not that our margin's increasing. It's just we're charging more to do the same amount of work, and the margin's roughly the same, maybe more in some cases. But I'm just, I can't believe at how willing our customers are and the market is to accept these massive rate increases.
Yeah, it really has moved from, can you move it? Not how much. That's not the first question any longer. And I do want to correct actually a statement I made. I said we've been in the industry for about the same amount of time. Assuming you came in the industry in 2012, you just referenced you've been in for 30 years. That would make me 11 coming into the industry. So not accurate. Mike is far longer in this than I am. You just look really young, man.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been trucking my whole life, and just an interesting time.
Yeah.
To see what's going on right now.
I think it's living in Kelowna keeps you keeps you young.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. I guess that there's so much to sort of unpack in terms of where this is all going to end up and where this is going to go, and because it can't just keep going. Like it can't just there is a breaking point. But it's really interesting. I was talking to one of my coworkers before we started this conversation about real estate in Toronto, and it's sort of this notion of this can't keep going up. But I bought my first house 15 years ago. And I remember being afraid of a bubble then. My first I think it was $212,000 I bought a house for 15 years ago, and here we are. And so it's not. And I don't want to be naive and young and be like, oh, this can't happen because I've never lived through a real downturn. But sort of taking this back to transportation costs, when you're seeing truckloads from Toronto to Vancouver, which used to be it felt like forever, were $45,000 to $6,000, and now they're $13,000.
Maybe 20 in some cases.
Right, unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so, what is the point of when does that break? Like, not necessarily break in terms of like we can't keep doing this, but what's the inflection point here? What is that moment?
Supply and demand. Number one, it's when people stop wanting to pay $20,000 for a truckload. I think there's some, in BC anyway, I see shortages in the supermarkets. And I don't think it's because they don't have the food. It's because they don't want to pay, triple for a load of cereal to stock the shelves with. They'll go and move something else that's more high value and maybe more margin for the supermarkets. There's just things going on right now. I think when people stop ordering, truck supplies become more abundant, the prices will drop. We've got shortages. We've got, obviously, some border issues right now and whatnot. So those aren't helping. The mandates that came through between the border for vaccines have affected U.S. trucks and Canadian trucks alike. I think U.S., no one talks about it, but the U.S. truckers, they don't want to come to Canada at the best of times, let alone if they got to deal with this border stuff. So it's really affecting. Until things calm down, I don't think we'll see the real bottom of this if there's still artificial inflation going on from government or just mandate-wise, right? So it's interesting to see. We'll see how it shakes out. But like I say, until that flattens out, we won't know. Yeah,
because it's hard for me to imagine. And I think in some cases it's large retailers, if we're going to kind of stick to that vertical, saying that stuff has to be on shelves. The competitive landscape is such that you've got you're the biggest whale in any room of all time is Amazon simply saying, I'll get that for you tomorrow. And so when that is the competitive landscape that you're up against as a large retailer, I mean, in some ways the expectation is you have to have the $20,000 truckload of cereal on the shelf, because how that erodes your long-term customer value and your long-term customer loyalty is pretty, could be catastrophic. It's consequential anyway. And so I think that, as you kind of mentioned that, it brings to light, like, I wonder if is there a moment in time where we as consumers, because all that really happens there is we just start eliminating choice. Instead of having 50 cereals, you have 10. And it just it starts to kind of like where there's just less product. And I just think, I don't know how to think about this, but I can't imagine, specifically the large retailers, that when we say that word, there's, a few that come to mind. It's like, how do they think about, I guess I could say it like Walmart. I don't know why I can't. I can say Amazon, but I can't say Walmart. So it's like, why it's because I'm afraid of Walmart, Mike. I think everyone's sort of afraid of Walmart. I think it's like the old days when I used to sell freight. We were just trained to be afraid of Walmart. So anyway, I'm gonna
afraid
say
of the DCs at least.
Exactly. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm here. I'm okay. But I just wonder how they they think about not having stuff on the shelves. I just don't picture that as an option for them, I guess. But there has to be a point where they just say no.
The flip side of that is higher prices. They're going to bring that load in, and it's what we see is the big items. If you've got let's say patio furniture boxes in a trailer, the margin, you have to charge a lot more for that. But if you can get a load of popsicle sticks, that extra amount of cost to move that truckload is averaged over all of those millions of sticks in that load, and it's not much more. But it's going to raise prices. They're going to bring it in, and we're going to get charged more, and then we'll see how much the consumer can take.
And I think we see that and not get into like too much consumer index type conversations, but hell, it's my podcast. I can talk about that.
Yeah, do what we want.
Yeah. So I can't help but think about like what I haven't really seen is, so there's this grocery store thing. We all know about this. We shop every week and we can kind of watch the grocery bills go up, and you see there's a term for it. I forget what it is, but the shrinking of packaging, but still same, less product, same price type.
Yep.
I'm seeing that for sure. And maybe what I'm talking about here is just we haven't had enough time to let it bleed into the system. I haven't noticed a significant amount of cost appreciation on things, and maybe I'm just not buying anything. Are you seeing that? Like, are you out like looking to buy something and being like, holy crap, that has significantly changed? Do you have any experiences recently that really jumped out at you from a price point?
Well, let's just start with trucking equipment.
Yeah.
You can't get trucks and trailers right now. I phoned our dealer, and they're just like, they won't even give me a price, let alone, it's just like out of control. I just have everything is high right now. Vehicles, like for a person looking for a personal vehicle right now, I'm just like, wow, there is nothing to be had, and everything's $20,000 more than it should be. And that's happening, I think, everywhere. I can't see a place that it's not happening right now, where the price is constantly going through the roof on everything. So you have to be our family is very, very careful on what we're purchasing. We're purchasing from, our membership stores like Costco, and we're buying things in bulk just to hedge our bets in terms of food pricing. It's just like, I'm tired of seeing things, $10 here, $20 there. Next thing you know, hits you in the pocketbook. Yeah,
I have actually, like on the grocery store, I have made a shift to a cheaper grocery store here in Toronto, and it's been pretty noticeable. So in some ways, I guess maybe my grocery bills come down, not necessarily because food prices have not gone up that much. It's just I've chosen more of a discount version of it. I did hear on the car notion, my wife was mentioning the other day that her used car right now would sell for more than she bought it for 2 years ago, which is a pretty crazy concept. And again, that kind of speaks to, I think, part shortages and supply shortages. I'm still, to stay on this track that's completely off topic, I'm still baffled at the demand. Like the absolute need for cars, for patio furniture. Like, sort of name your. I know cars are important and people have to have them, and I'm sure there'll be people listening to this and think I'm pretty dumb for thinking like that cars aren't this hardcore necessity. But it just feels like, is it? I don't know. I can't really wrap my head around this. The demand's
artificial, Justin.
Yeah, exactly.
It's artificial because I tell you right now, I've had a brand new truck on order since last April. It's still not here yet. And that's, it's going to be going, I don't think I'll get it in the next month or two, and that'll be a year of, on order. So I don't have a vehicle, so I need one.
Right.
And that's the demand that's happening here. And, I've also got a friend in finance that, finances freight companies or trucking companies. He says a lot of companies out there right now are buying equipment and buying lots of it, and they're trying to, it's busy, and they're trying to get as much as they can. And he's kind of concerned, actually. New trucks right now, we used to, I always pegged a new truck, a fleet spec truck, at $180,000. He's seeing invoices coming for $250,000, $240,000. And we just had an owner operator come with us the other day, the brand new Peterbilt, and I saw the bill on it, and it was $240,000. He says he's got $300,000 into it with all those add-ons and things like that. I'm just like, insane. And something's got to give.
I wonder about that when you think about and this is something that I've talked to a few people about, and it always seems that when times are good, you buy a bunch of trailers and trucks, and then they arrive and things have kind of shifted, and so you're sort of kind of constantly in this battle, because even in the best of times, trailers aren't a week away, right? These are always a long-term order, even when things are good. And so do you think about buying equipment in like cycles? So do you think about it when you'll buy it when things come down because you can be pragmatic about it, or is it a business and a decision that really has to be reactionary? Sort of how do you think about buying equipment?
Yeah, we try to think long term. Like we look at our business, what we want to do. Say we want to add on, and maybe increase our fleet size by 50%. What's that going to entail for us? We need to start looking at having trailers delivered throughout the year in a cycle. For like maybe every quarter, we need 2 or 3 trailers coming on board so we can have the trucks to put under them. And for other companies, it's not the same. Other companies are just looking at the shiny balls right now, and they're paying way more than they have to for used equipment. I've got trailers that are really, they're probably worth $10,000 on paper. I could probably get $50,000 or $60,000 for them right now, and there's no equipment to be had. But there's companies out there. I was talking to my friend again in finance, and there's companies out there that are buying equipment at full pop, paying way over market, and their main customers are the large load brokers. And I said that's a little bit dangerous. They've got 80% of their businesses with one of the national brokers. And I said, when things turn, they're gonna have all this equipment sitting around, and hopefully we have the cash to buy them when that happens.
Yeah, that was my follow up. Do you then wait to buy at that time? I mean,
for sure.
So are you going to sell your $10,000 trailers for?
No,
would you sell them right now? Right. Well, that's
I need them. Right. So it's crazy.
So you're part of the problem. You're not buying any inventory into the market.
Exactly. And some people we're trying to rent trailers, and I'm talking to rental companies. We've have a person specifically calling rental companies and getting their name on the list for anything that comes in. And I said, where are the traders? Like everybody's, we've got some downturn in cross-border freight right now. Where are the traders? And they're just holding on to them. They're not returning. They're going to pay the rental every month, and just, if they need them, they need them. Yeah,
we have a good friend of ours runs sales at TrailCon, I mean, he hasn't had any trailer. He basically hasn't had any. If he hears this, he's going to hate that I'm saying this, and hopefully his bosses aren't listening. But he hasn't had anything to do for 18 months. There's been no trailers to rent, so he's busy fielding calls, and he could probably be making a fortune. But there's just no trailers to rent. To your point, people are just keeping them. They're keeping them like they own them. They'll just pay the rent on them, and used or otherwise, it's better to have them. At least you have it when you need it. And so it's the imbalance of this stuff just feels it feels unsustainable, and I don't think that's a daring comment, but it actually is.
No, I don't like the feel of it, Justin.
Yeah, same here.
I don't like the feel of it. It just feels wrong. Like, gouging. Albeit rates have to come up in transport. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
Like what we're doing, it doesn't have to go this high. I'd love it to stay this high, and we could adjust for it. Great, but it's just unsustainable. So something's wrong. I just don't know when or what or how it's going to work out.
Yeah, I've talked to people on the podcast and talked to people just in general from companies, smaller than you to, over $1 billion a year in revenue. And that's unfortunately the sentiment. And I'm asking the same question on every podcast to get a point of view. But the consistent point of view is this doesn't feel like anything from the past. And I can't even tell you what's going to happen. I asked you originally for an 18 to 24 month projection. I've asked that for everybody, and generally it's like, I don't know what's going to be like next month, and that's I think the thing that creates that level of uncertainty, and it certainly is very telling when most of the people all of the people I'm speaking to are on the they're on the sell side. They own brokerages or trucking companies, and really from a top line revenue perspective, never done better, but feels super uncomfortable with what's going on, And again, I want to express too to those listening, and quite frankly, from a large macro anonymized data perspective, we can see this at our business. Margins haven't increased, So there's no net new margin. So any shippers listening to this, there's the costs are just being passed through, and the margins in some cases overall are actually we're seeing go down a little bit because of the appetite. If you take a 10-point margin on a $5,000 truckload, you're probably not taking 10 points on a $20,000 load. So you look at your aggregate, your gross margins we're actually seeing a downward trend over the data sets.
We had to adjust actually in January when the shit hit the fan.
Yeah. And
we had to adjust. We actually held our rates. We have rate contracts in place with customers. We pulled them to adjust your rates. Basically, if you didn't book it on the phone with us at that time, we couldn't hold that rate any longer. 24 hours was the max we put on it, and it was just I think we probably took a hit in January, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Very, very calm. I haven't seen exactly it all wash out yet, but I got a feeling that it's not going to be great.
Yeah. Again, I think that's the story of this, is that the top line revenues are not indicative of the success that we're having. So we can all kind of speak to that. And as a startup, we're in an enviable position where profitability isn't how we think about the world. But I think for companies that are running trucks and brokerage, that is the way you think about the world, is purely the way it has to be done. And so I think for those out there that maybe are a little less familiar with the space, don't be fooled by these prices. These don't necessarily make all our brethren any richer. These just end up ultimately coming back into our pockets and are just they're just costs that are being passed through the network.
It's just have to adjust. That's the main thing, is just trying to adjust quickly to these things. We've noticed a lot of the truckloads out of the market have come to light, if you will, and we're an LTL carrier primarily. And we just have been inundated with truckloads. I think a lot of the LTL carriers in the past have maybe moved towards truckload. They have shifted and just trying to figure out where the market's headed and where to adjust. I've also seen, I have a business group of transport professionals in North America, and I always query them as well. And, I say, how long do we have left? What's going to happen here? And the consensus is, this is just, freight owners like you and me, but 6 months, 8 months before the backlog of Asian goods coming in. People are ordering Christmas right now, right? Mm-hmm. So when that gets here and is on the shelves, and then the backlog clears, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good opportunity for us to close it down. We'll end it on the "we'll see what happens" note.
Yeah.
But Mike, man, thanks for sparing the time. I know it's a crazy time out there, and I appreciate you slicing some off for us. And I think there was a lot of interesting insights. And again, thanks for being a good partner to us, and thanks for sharing some wisdom on just how to think about buying technology, because it's we really, I think, as a and I want to be able to say this without being obviously overly biased to this, but we need to think about our business. We need to think about technology as a competitive advantage and not a cost center in our business. It has to be the thing we invest in and think about how we're going to get to the next level, because it's not going away. And quite frankly, your competitors are doing it. Case in point, Mike from Moto. If we look at what he's doing in his business of 30 people, they're running fast.
Yeah, we're running fast, and that's the name of the game, is keep moving or get left behind.
Yeah. Mike, thank you, my friend. Really great seeing you, and we'll, I'm sure, certainly talk soon.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you for tuning in today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.